This is Country Today, and it is Farm Safety Week, and the theme this year is Farm Safety, a core value. Farm Safe Australia is hoping that we can do something to reduce the deaths and the injuries associated with the health and safety risks that there are on farms. And this is a topic of interest to the Australian Centre for Agricultural Health and Safety. Director Tony Lower joins us on the program. Hello, Tony.
Hi, Greg.
We speak to you from time to time, particularly to do with issues to do with quad bikes, because sadly, quad bikes are one of the safety risks on farms, as we see demonstrated by the number of injuries and even deaths that occur on farms. And so quad bikes must be one of the points of focus when we come to think about farm safety.
Certainly that's one of the major priorities we've got for this year. But in addition to that, we still need to focus on what I think is really an old nemesis for agriculture, and that's the whole use around tractors and tractor-related injuries. And the third thing that we're really trying to look at as well is child safety, because unfortunately we do know that around 20% of the fatalities that happen on farms happen to children. And there's many steps that we can actually take to actually reduce all of these injuries.
All right, so maybe we should talk about some of those steps then. And when we think about the machinery like the tractors or the quad bikes or the whatevers, because we do have all sorts of machinery on our farms, I guess there are some steps that we can take to make the operation of those more safe?
Certainly there are. And I think in terms of the equipment and machinery that's used on properties, we still unfortunately do also see a large number of entanglements where people get a hand or a leg entangled in a piece of equipment. And frequently this is largely because guarding has been removed that was on the equipment. And what we'd really encourage farmers to do is that if there is a bit of equipment where they know there is a known hazard, to try and make sure that that is fixed as soon as possible. Not put it off for a rainy day, but to do it here and now, so that then it reduces the chances of anyone being injured or heaven forbid, even worse.
Now, you raise an interesting thing there. Are some of these accidents with equipment design faults or because of modifications perhaps made by the owner of the equipment?
Clearly within agriculture there's a range of different equipment that's used, and some of that equipment will be quite old, some of it will be quite new. Clearly we find that the newer equipment is far safer in terms of its design. However, if guards and other protective equipment is removed from that machinery, then obviously it does increase the risk that's available for the users and or the people that are standing by the equipment.
Are we becoming more safety conscious? Are we seeing improvements in design?
Again, undoubtedly there's been marked improvements in design. I think we can see from the number of incidents that we get through our rural and regional hospitals, there's been a very significant observable reduction in amputations in particular, and that's a really pleasing thing, and that is simply put down to better equipment design and better guarding.
Now, you mentioned children too, making farms safer for children, because let's face it, children, they like to go out and play and explore and touch things and even ride on things, and I guess there's some real safety risks there.
Again, as I indicated earlier, we know that 20% of the fatalities actually involve children. One of the other really quite striking features of the profile that we find for the childhood cases is that just over a third of all of the cases that do occur are people who actually don't live on the farm. They're visitors to the farm. So even though you may not have children that live on your farm, it's really important to have safeguards in place to try and make sure the area can be as safe as possible. And particularly for very small children, I'm talking here toddlers under the age of 5, having a safe play area where children can play safely without coming into contact with hazards is really critical to reducing the risks. And unfortunately the risks include a whole range of different activities and environments. The key one, of course, is drowning. We see that time and time again, unfortunately. But it also, having a safe play area ensures that children can't get into contact with workshops or stock or even with passing vehicles that might be going past the homestead.
Are there any particular campaigns that you have going right now, or any issues of concern that you're particularly wanting to highlight at the moment?
I think particularly in respect to children, the two things that we would really highly value is people to have a look at developing safe play areas for children on farms. And secondly, the other thing that we're seeing unfortunately far too much of is children dying and being injured on quad bikes. Quite clearly, kids and quad bikes, irrespective of the size of those quad bikes, is really a fatal mix. We are very supportive of children being involved in agricultural work and trying to build our next generation of farmers. but we want to do that safely. And if you want your children to actually help you in your day-to-day operations, a quad bike is certainly not the appropriate vehicle for them to be using. They're far better off being on a suitably sized two-wheeler with an appropriate protective gear, including a helmet, because unfortunately, even though they may come off those vehicles, when they do come off, they don't get crushed and asphyxiated underneath them as they have been the cases with quad bikes.
Is it perhaps a website or some information that we can direct people to think about during this National Farm Safety Week?
Certainly. The website for FarmSafe Australia is www.farmsafe.org.au, and there's a whole range of information there for producers to actually help you trying to do practical things in a cost-effective way.
All right, Tony Lower, thanks for joining us on Country Today.
Thanks very much, Greg.